All right, well, hey, it's Rob, and I'm in the Edgewood neighborhood in Atlanta, and I think I'm one of the few people that know, other than whoever owns the Hendrix Ultra Lounge behind me, that Jimi Hendrix actually lived in this neighborhood here in Atlanta, at least for a few weeks in the winter of 1964. So in 1964, Jimi Hendrix was a touring musician playing with various bands, I think mostly with the Isley Brothers at this point. And he sent a postcard home in October of 64. And the postcard was addressed to his father, Al. He said he was on tour with a band called the Bonnevilles. They were in Florida, heading to Miami. They were eventually going to end up in Dallas. But he wanted to let his father know that his new address was actually here in this neighborhood here, Edgewood in Atlanta. And he said he lived at 318 Fort Street, apartment 3, and that he was out on the road touring with the band. I think maybe the band was actually the Bonnevilles. He toured with many bands for, very short periods of time, although most of this year, 64, he was with the Isley Brothers. But he'd get kicked out of the bus a lot. Matter of fact, one time I think maybe after 64, maybe it was in 65 or something, the famous story that he was playing with Little Richard, and Little Richard kicked him off the bus in the snow, and he had to, walk and find shelter for the night or whatever. So he would play with these bands, and of course he was a super talented musician even at the time, but very flamboyant, and he tried to attract undue attention to himself. He was just a side man. He hated it. He was trying to get away, from being a side man and start to do his own thing, which he would a couple of years later. But at any point, he played with various bands, including the Isleys and a guy named Gorgeous George, who was a singer. And he would be with these bands for a little while, and then they would toss him out because he would try to take a solo or play with his teeth or put the guitar over his head or, do something to attract attention that was unwarranted and unappreciated for a side man who was just supposed to be in the back, maybe doing a few dance moves or whatever, and that was it. And we're on 4th Street right now. I really can't tell where 318 was. The building is long gone. There are no pictures. I don't know if anyone knows. You'd have to probably go to City Records or something or other to figure out, where exactly 318 4th Street was and what it looked like. But it was here somewhere in this neighborhood, and at least for a few weeks. Jimmy lived here. He said this was his permanent address. And he started out the year 1964, I know, living in Harlem, and, started touring around with these various bands. And at some point he said his, address of record was right here on 4th Street in Atlanta. This actually looks like a fort on 4th Street. This is actually a memorial to a figure in civil rights. I think this is the Dobbs Memorial here. And for all I know, this was where, Jimmy's apartment was. It really could have been anywhere. But the reason why he was here on 4th Street, although there are a couple 4th Streets, there's, I think, a 4th Street northeast and a 4th Street southeast. Southeast is pretty short, so I suspect it wasn't there. It's a few blocks, of course, south of here. But this is 4th Street North, and you can see, of course, it's been taken over by the freeway, but at the time he lived in this neighborhood because it was close to a lot of the clubs where he would be playing. We're going to take a walk all the way down and try to avoid the streetcar, which we just saw. And we're going to take a walk down to a very famous club, which is still in existence, and that is the Royal Peacock Royal Peacock was very well known in its time. All the jazz legends played there in the 50s and the 60s. And you can see by this mural what the neighborhood used to look like here. This is what's known as Sweet Auburn. And very famous street with a lot of black-owned businesses. This was the place to see and be seen. And up there it even says the name of the club, the Royal Peacock. We're going to go check that out. We'll just take a walk down here just like Jimmy would have walked, from his apartment on 318 4th Street, apartment number 3, down to this club here, where he would have played with bands like the Isleys and later Little Richard. So the band the Bonnevilles I know he had been touring with, and many others, like I said, for short stints of time. If you don't know the history of Hendrix, he had a very, very chaotic childhood, and he was always just a couple steps ahead of the rent collector. Lived in probably 20 different places in Seattle alone. Lived at different times with both of his parents, his mom and his dad, sometimes just with his dad, sometimes with family members, sometimes at the YMCA or who knows where. So Hendrix wasn't big on school either, and at some point I think he just gave up. He ended up getting busted for stealing cars and went in front of a judge. And the judge basically, gave him an ultimatum and said, well, you can either go to prison or you can go to the army. So the army it was. Hendrix was in the army for, a year, a couple of years. And the story that, most people are aware of is that he was in the 101st Airborne, jumped off an airplane with a parachute. He injured his ankle or broke his ankle and was honorably discharged. The real story, check that out. The real story is very different. He hated it. He, of course, was not a very disciplined person, unless it came to playing guitar all night. And as a matter of fact, he used to sleep in the bed with his guitar. And I think he found a way to get out of the army by claiming that he actually was gay and that he was in love with the drill sergeant. So at some point they got rid of him, and he was out of there. So after that, he started touring around with various bands, and finally he met up with the Isley Brothers. Of course, we just lost Rudolph just a couple days ago, actually. And that's where he ended up down here in 1964 in October. I think we're here. Is this the building? Yep. I'll go get a little perspective on this. And I believe, yeah, this is it. So here we are. This is the Royal Peacock, one of the places he would have played in Atlanta with the Isleys, other bands. And like I said, very famous jazz club of its day. It turned into a disco, it turned into a reggae club, closed for a while, and I believe now it is in fact a reggae club again. How about that? So everything eventually comes around, but still open, and we're happy to see that. And that's it. So that's my tour here of the Sweet Auburn area, Edgewood, and the history of good old Jimi Hendrix in 1964. So you can see how long it would take him to walk down here to the Royal Peacock, and that's probably why he was staying over there in a non-existent apartment building just a couple blocks down on 4th Street. Nobody really knows what that building looked like or how long he stayed there, but he was there for a little while playing around with these different bands before he went solo, went to England, became famous, and as we all know the rest of the story, sadly died in September September 18th, 1970, I believe, at the age of 27. All right, we'll sign off for now, and yeah, thanks for coming along on this little trip. It was fun for me too. I've never been down here, and we'll see you soon.